shall we start?
1 second, ma'am, but
Yes,
we are
sure.
starting. Okay, 1 second. Very good afternoon to all. I, Dr. Preeti Singh, welcome you all in this 1 week long lecture series on contemporary debates in politics, organized by the Department of Political Science, Vasudha College for Women, Rajghat, Varanasi. Politics has occupied a central place in human society since time immemorial. It is this significance of politics which made Aristotle proclaim that man is a political animal. Politics is integrally associated with the social. On the one hand, it shapes the social, on the other, is shaped by the social. In fact, change in the social consciousness leads to change in the nature, issues, and language and grammar of politics. At the same time, change in the political consciousness results into emergence of new values, new thoughts, new expectations. Hence, the nature of politics is dynamic. The issues, values, perceptions, and strategies in politics never remain static. When we look at the 21st century, we find that in the globalized, digitalized, knowledge based society of the 21st century, there are now new concerns, opportunities, and challenges. Politics in the 21st century cannot be, and in fact should not be, seen and understood through a me versus they lens. Global concerns of peace, environment, human security, human health, and so on requires a we perspective. Many issues which were not seen as political in the previous centuries are now at center stage. We need to critically engage in the issues of women, LGBTQ, differently able, displaced, and the deprived for building of a sound world order. And therefore, it is essential to understand the new dimensions of power relation in politics, and in fact also to define politics going beyond the power perspective, which remained the dominant perspective in politics for a long time. So, the present lecture series is actually aiming at drawing critical attention on some of the major issues and debates in the contemporary politics. Objectives of the lecture series broadly are to understand and reflect on nature, causes, major issues, major dimensions, and remedies of gender violence, particularly in India, question of ethics in administration, trends and dimensions of political violence in India, concept of political violence, and relation between politics and ethics. And it is actually a matter of great privilege for us that today we have, on the first day of the lecture series, we have with us Dr. Sudeshna Mukherjee from Center for Women's Studies, Bangalore University. She'll be speaking today on gender violence in India, which is her field of expertise. Before inviting Madam to start her lecture, I'd like to give a brief introduction about her for our participants. Dr. Sudeshna Mukherjee is an associate professor at the Center for Women's Studies at Bangalore University. She has done extensive research work in the field of gender studies and women's studies. She has occupied many major academic positions and she has contributed immensely to the field of academics. Some of her major achievements and major contributions are that she was appointed as member coordinator of the drafting committee on women's empowerment policy for Government of Karnataka in April 2016. She was nominated to represent the country in prestigious United States Department of State Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs sponsored international visit leadership program on the fight against gender-based violence, which was held in USA in the month of July 2015. She has done several research projects, including a report as chief consultant on evaluation of Bhagyalakshmi project, a report as chief consultant on evaluation of rehabilitation of Devdasi program, and she has also completed a minor UGC project on sociological examination of the emerging issues related to adoption in India, moving towards a more inclusive policy and practice as the principal investigator in 2016. She has major publications, some are very important publications. One is her book on Vision for an Inclusive Society, a Feminist Perspective. Another book is on Gender in the Market Economy. She has contributed many papers in national and international journals. She has primarily worked on gender, aging, rehabilitation of Devdasi, Dalit women, sex workers, and related areas. So it is our proud privilege to have you, ma'am, with us. And I'm very happy. Once again, I want to welcome you on the behalf of the Department of Political Science and on my personal behalf. And now, without taking much time, I'd like to invite you to start your lecture. And at the end, we'll take up the questions from the participants. So you can do one thing. At the end, whatever questions you have, you can just post the question in the chat box so that we can entertain maximum questions. So once again, I welcome you, madam, and now I'll request you to start your lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Priti. Thank you, Dr. Priti. It is my privilege to be part of your college. I have previously been here. It was really a very great experience, and I'm really happy that you are taking such great initiative for your students. So a very good afternoon, those who are connected with us of this web program. So my dear students, today our topic is the gender-based violence. So gender-based violence is the most widespread form of the abuse worldwide, affecting 1/3 of all the women in their lifetime. So if you see, this is the first known form of violence done by the one group against another group in history. So if you see the caste violence or racial violence or violence based on religion, these are all the subsequent developments. So this is the first known form of a violence in this entire world when one group is subjugating or oppressing the another group. So this gender-based violence is deeply rooted in obviously the gender inequality, and it is the ubiquitous. ये सर्वत्र, I mean, आपको ये सब जगह दिखेगा, irrespective of the nature of the society. बहुत developed society हो तब भी है, it is a rural society, it is a backward society, it is a tribal society, some form of other it is there. So now we are living amidst the pandemic, and we are keep on discussing about this mutating capacity of the corona. It is changing its form. Now we are talking that UK there is a more severe strength has come. So that way, the more people are dying. People are now stopped going to US. Many countries stopped UK stopped their flights because the virus is mutating. So gender-based violence is just like a mutating virus. It's just changed its form, and it's omnipresent. It is present in every society. It continues to be the one of the most notable human rights violations within all societies. Gender-based violence is violence directed against a person because of their gender. So we should not think that it only affects women. Men are also victim of gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is it takes a very critical form against the people who belongs to the sexuality minorities. But if we see for all very other purpose, statistically, if we look into the gender-based violence, we see that violence against women is one of the most pronounced expression of the unequal power relations between women and men. So though it affects men also, but majority of the victims are the women and the girls of different age. So for today's purpose, my presentation will be mostly centered on the woman. So now let us have a look at what is a definition. I mean, what is a copybook definition of gender-based violence? It is defined by United Nations during the 1995 report of the fourth World Conference on Women, जो बीजिंग में हुआ था, चाइना बीजिंग में. So as per that definition, उस हिसाब से ये है कि this is an any act that results in or likely to result in physical, sexual or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. So this is a very crucial aspect. We will keep coming to this aspect, that please keep in your mind that private and the public life, it is a violence which is affecting both private and public life of the women and girls. So now you may ask me a very critical question, that why we are calling it a gender-based violence, why just not a sex-based violence? So I mean, by now I think you all are a little aware of what is sex and what is gender. That to all of us, we know that sex is a biological natural distinction and the gender is a social and cultural construction. So biological distinction of sex, that follows a binary pattern, that when we talk about the sexual identities, it is male and female, these two. And nature has a very simplistic way of dividing this. I mean, these two division, this is just the two categories. There is no hierarchies ascribed by the nature. So how these categories are made? So there are, you can see that based on the chromosomal difference, you know that women, they have the XX and the men, they have the XY chromosome. Then there are the hormonal differences. You know that that testosterone among the men and estrogen and progesterone in the woman. Then there are certain physical differences, including the external genitalia. These are basically what are the biological differences, and on the basis of these biological differences, nature imposed two specific work, like men impregnate women and woman gives birth to the children. That's all what nature did it. But rest of the things, who will take care of the child, who will go and earn, who will take care of the home, who will give birth to the baby, who will cook, and who will go and run the nation, who will go and run the marketplace. Nature absolutely has got no role in such kind of thing. So here comes the importance of the gender, where gender is socially constructed, and these hierarchical division, gender division on the base of the work. So these are basically gender based. These are socially constructed. Who will do what, who will not do what, these are all decided by the society. So when we talk about sex, sex is a very limiting concept. Sex has only two, it's a very binary concept. So it's only talks about masculinity and the, male and the female. So, but when you come to the gender, gender talks about, gender is like a scale. It has got two fixed points. One is the masculinity and another is the femininity. And in between, each of us can place ourselves in terms of the grades. So you can be 40% masculine, you can be 60% feminine, you can be 90% feminine, you can be 10% masculine, you can be 100% feminine, 100% masculine. So these are, so we can play, so it gives us a lot of options. So if your biological sex and social gender match, then you are a cis man or a cis woman. If your biological sex and social gender does not match, then you are a trans person. So what I say that when we try to use the word gender, it gives us a plethora of opportunities, plethora of understanding. It gives us that moment you say gender, it gives you that entire history of inequality, how inequality is socially created. So let us look at what are the different approaches towards this construction of gender and gender-based violence. There is an individualistic approach to gender which believes that masculinity and femininity are traits that men and women incorporate into their selves or identities, either through a biologically determined predisposition or these traits through the socialization process. Then individualistic theories presupposes that a propensity to use aggression and violence in an innate and learned characteristic, it is a part of the masculinistic, this aggression and violence is a very masculine concept. So qualitative studies found that men reports that perpetrating partners assault when they perceive a threat to their authority or status. So men, when their masculinity is threatened, generally they are prone to violence. But the interactionist approach, there is another perspective on gender that suggests that interactive context influences the violent behavior. If violence is a means by which men construct their masculinity, violence should occur in situations in which men desire to demonstrate or perform masculinity for others. One such situation is when a man's masculinity is challenged or called into a question. You can think about this will be much easier to understand if I bring that Nirbhaya case in this context. If you see, आपको याद है तो आप देखिए निर्भया केस में जब वो perpetrators लोग arrest हो गए, then when police asked them ने आपने क्यों उसको मार दिया? Okay, it was rape, fine, but why it was such brutally happened that you had to kill that particular girl? They were almost about to kill. Then what was the answer of those group of men? That why she made so much protest. वो बहुत बात कर रही थी, बहुत ऊंची आवाज में बात कर रही थी. She was protesting. Her the male partner with her, that guy was also protesting. So that protest, so that means they were challenging the masculinity. ये masculinity को challenge करना उसको पसंद नहीं आया. So they not only ended up in raping the girl, they inserted a big iron rod to her vagina just because she was questioning, she was challenging their masculinity. So other studies suggest that violence is used in a compensatory fashion when men lack other resources to display masculinity. For example, rates of physical and emotional abuse are higher among men whose female partners out-earn them. उससे ज़्यादा कमाती है. The interactionist approach might also help us to explain why rates of gender-based violence are higher among those who live in poverty. Financial success as a family breadwinner is another idealized characteristics of masculinity under patriarchy. That men is the person वो संसार चलाता है, उसका हाथ में सारे पावर है. So breadwinner is a man. Even आप देखिए किताबों में, बचपन का बच्चे लोग का किताबों में, स्कूल बेस्ड बुक्स में, टेक्स्ट बुक में फादर मदर इसमें दिखाता है. फादर इज पर्सन हु इज गोइंग टू द ऑफिस, मदर इज द पर्सन हु इज कुकिंग. सो घर चलाना फादर का काम है, घर को संभालना मम्मा का काम है. सो दीज थिंग्स आर it is a very ingrained, it is there in our brain from the very childhood, and it is not a very conscious process, but it is a very unconscious socialization process which keep this in mind in both the men and women. So what happened that the men, all men are not able to live up to this ideal that वही घर चलाएगा, उससे नहीं बनता है. There are so many other social reasons for that persons maybe not getting a regular job. Even if he is in a regular job, he lost his job, he may not be physically well. There could be so many things. His caste identity may be coming in the way of getting a proper job. So there are so many things are there, his educational qualifications. So ये उस सोच में नहीं है कि घर चलाना दोनों का काम है. So in some interactionist gender theory proposes that Violence may be a compensatory method of exerting control and constructing masculinity among men who feel their authority and masculinity have been called into questions. This argument applies to men's violence perpetrated against other men as well as their violence perpetrated against the female partners. In this context, you can remember, I don't know, कितने लोगों ने देखे हैं, there was a recent movie of this Tapasi Pannu, that Thappad. So when you are otherwise feeling threatened, your authorities are challenged in the office, a very common way of showing your power or showing your masculinity just by beating your wife. So then from there, we move to a third perspective. That is a third and newly emerging approach to gender studies, contain that gender is a form of a social structure. This is a structuralist approach. These perspective emphasizes that gender organizes social institutions as well as identities, attitudes, and interactions. Structuralist contends that gender is a system of stratification that places women and men into the unequal categories, roles, and occupations. The structural perspective emphasizes that gender exists as a social force that operates independently or individual wishes or desires. Even when men and women do not desire to live gendered life or to support male dominance, they often find themselves compelled to do so by logic of the gendered choices. So if you are a woman, you have to live your life like a woman. There are so many perspectives. There are so many ways your gender identity is constructed, both in the private as well as in the public spheres. So the structuralist approach is methodologically distinct from the individualistic and interactionist approaches, that it conceptualizes gender as a pattern of resource distribution and social organization rather than a predictor of individual behavior. So that means access to resources. If you see that there is a gendered access. Very recently, we have come up with the NHFS fourth round of data surveys, like 2019-20 data has come. Simple thing, if you see that access to mobile phone, now on this, especially post-pandemic society, access to the online technology becomes very crucial. So you will see what a gendered, how gendered it is. How many men they are having access and how many women they are having access to this mobile technology. So I am not talking about the traditional things. So right from sex ratio to the access of mobile technology, everything is gendered. Whether you will be allowed to live, or then if you are allowed to live, then how you will be living your life, everything is gendered. So it is political. So in one of the feminist thinker, Carol Hanisch, she made a very popular, very meaningful and popular statement that personal is political. Because when I was initially talking to you about what is gender-based violence, that time I was telling you that gender-based violence, when we are talking about, we have to emphasize on both public and private. What happened? Often this gender-based violence is not recognized because they happened in the four walls of the private domain. So that way, Carol Hanisch said that personal is political. What is politics? What is politics? Politics is nothing but that use of power. So in a political science, you talk about using power to achieve the controlling of the state. There could be the different ideologies, different things, so many other things come, but ultimate thing is the how you manipulate, how you control power to achieve something. That is not only happening in the public sphere, in a very private home, four walls of the home, also the politics is a very, very, a common thing, and not only common, that structures the relationship. So we have to be aware that, therefore, this Carol Hanisch is talking about that personal is political, that politicizing personal, understanding the dynamics of power relationship in personal is very, very important. From a structuralist gender perspective, individual sex does not predict a violent behavior. Rather, the gender structure influences women's and men's opportunities and rewards for the use of violent behavior. So, this is very, very profoundly interesting. You see that you behave the way society rewards your certain kind of an approach. So men are rewarded being aggressive, being violent. Uh, that is one of the traits of masculinity. Even if you see sometimes, if you say that if parents say that ये मेरा बेटी नहीं बेटा है, that is a praise. That is a positive connotation. बट इफ पेरेंट्स बेटा को दिखा के बोलते हैं कि ये मेरा बेटा नहीं बेटी है, दैट विल बी कंसिडर्ड एज अ इंसल्ट. सो यू सी हाउ सोसाइटी परसीव्स. बेटी को बेटा बोलो तो वो प्रेज हो जाता है, बेटा को बेटी बोलो तो वो इंसल्ट हो जाता है. सो बेटी बनना नहीं है, बेटा बनना है. सो you can see that how society praises or society distributes its rewards and of also the punishments. So that is very, very important. Feminist scholars have repeatedly emphasized that GBV must be, gender-based violence, must be understood in the context of larger system of theory of intersectionality. So what is theory of intersectionality? Kimberly Crenshaw, an American law professor who first coined this term in 1989, explained that intersectionality is a prism for seeing how various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. So ये सुनने में थोड़ा difficult लग रहा है, but if I say that if I am a woman, if I am a Dalit woman, if I am a Dalit lesbian woman who is having some kind of a physical deformities, then you can understand that my challenges will be much more than just a woman. So when there are the different layers of inequalities, they crisscross each other. So your caste identity, your economic identity, your gender identity. So gender is indeed an analytical variable. But when this analytical variable is reinforced with other analytical variables like caste, class, religion, so your inequalities or your violence against you become much more profound. So only one dimension is not enough to understand the nature of gender-based violence. So these different layers, when once they meet, that becomes the more significant, violation than in a normal situation. So what are the different forms of gender-based violence? Gender-based violence can include sexual, physical, mental, and economic harm inflicted in both public and private domain. It also includes threats of violence, coercion, and manipulation. It may take many forms such as intimate partner violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, child marriage, sati, female genital mutilations, so-called honor crimes, endless. The consequences of the gender-based violence are devastating and can have lifelong repercussions for the survivor, and वो मर भी सकती है. So yes, death is in many a situation is the ultimate outcome of the gender-based violence. Fumzal Miambo Gunika, she's the executive director of the UN Women. In the COVID context, she said that COVID pandemic that has also running a shadow pandemic. I was talking to you now that how highly mutating this gender-based violence is. It is a very, very highly mutating virus. So during the pandemic, when all of us were scared of our life, when the lockdown was induced as a protective measures, but it brought another deadly danger in its terrain, as we have seen a shadow pandemic of increasing violence against women. As per the data compiled by the Ministry of Women and Child Development as it is presented in Lok Sabha, that National Commission of Women during this lockdown time received 10 times more complaints than it usually received. So that high was the occurrences of the violence. NHFS 4 that I was talking to you about this last week, it has come. So NHFS 4 is talking that ever married women who have ever experienced spousal violence, their number in India is 31.1. So it just follows the global pattern. Almost 1/3 of the women, they experience some form of violence or other in their life. And another very, very crucial aspect of the gender-based violence is that non-reporting. Generally, the rate of reporting is less than 10-15%. 85% cases in normal gender-based violence are never reported. And if it is rape, non-reporting is 99%. So only 1% rape cases are reported. I don't think that rape is sexual violence which inflicted by some unknown person and it's an act of lust. No. 70% of the rape cases, perpetrators are already known to the victim or the survivor. So often they are the family members. You can see that on the context of the punishment for the rape victim. Often we were asking for the death penalty as a punishment, but there is a group of feminists, they're opposing it. First of all, that right to life, those debates are different thing. But another issues they raise that harsher the punishment, lesser the conviction. So if a girl, if she knows that her perpetrator, who is her uncle, brother, or father, or very known person, if the person is going to get, capital punishment, whatever little chances she had to report the issue will never happen. So that was one of the issues, because in gender-based violence, often the perpetrator is known or sometimes very close to the victim. So taking the case to the police or seeking the justice often becomes difficult for these reasons. Then there are other reasons also which will come. So what we see here, that there is no single factor that can explain the gender-based violence in our societies. There are many factors. So if we club those factors, we can see that first is a cultural factor. And in cultural factor, the first things come that patriarchy, Pitrisatta. So it is such a profound terms. How you realize that patriarchy is so predominant and such penetrating concept? Just look at all our religion. If you see that all the natural life in any form, in all living species, it is the female species who are responsible for the creation of life. That is a natural fact. But look at all our religions. You see in most of the religion, almost all major religion, they ascribe the origin to a father. Many religions don't recognize the presence of feminine. In our Hinduism, we have a very strong presence of feminine. But still, originator is Brahma. Creator is Brahma. So it defies all the natural laws. So otherwise, women are the creator, but in such situation, it is always the man who creates. If you look into some kind of a socio-economic perspective on patriarchy, if you see that writings of Engels in a beautifully wrote that origin of patriarchy. So according to him, traditionally, if you think about the first society, that those were supposed to be the only matriarchal society ever existed. You may ask me, what about Nayars in Kerala or Khasis in Meghalaya? No, they are at best, they're matrilineal or matrilocal. They are never matriarchal. Archi, the very word archi is associated with power in the woman's hand. So they trace their lineage, Their properties may be handed down from mothers to daughter, but controlling power instead of fathers, it is vested with the mother's brother. So we live this. We think about that early matriarchy. Why it was called matriarchy? Because it was like a hunting gathering kind of a society. People were moving from here and there. So man and woman were in a free relationship. On such situation, maternity was only the established. So mother has absolute power over the children, because children's, in a free relationship, only motherhood can be identified, no fatherhood. With the uh, advent of agriculture, domestication of animal, when the notion of property and surplus started coming in, then again for acquiring property, man took a little leading role than woman, because of the reproductive role of the woman, because women could not take part in warfare or acquiring of the property, because of they used to take care of the children, their pregnancy, their health conditions. So they took a little back step to than the men. But क्या हुआ उसके बदले में, that when this concept that property came into their hand, men's hand, so it legitimate, in the concept of ownership of the property, the concept came that after me, who will get my property? Then that legitimizes the control over women's sexuality, and which, according to many legal code, has been deemed essential to ensure patrilineal inheritance. So patrilineal inheritance demanded, creation of patriarchy demanded that control of women's sexuality. Then can only men effectively claim that children are born out of this woman is only mine. They also realize that one woman can give birth to one child in a year, but a man can impregnate many women. So if I have many women under my control, I can have many labor force who can fight for me in the war. So then who can inherit my property? So what we see that patriarchal and sexist view legitimize the violence to ensure the dominance and superiority of man. Other cultural factors, of course, which are part of the patriarchy are gender stereotypes and the prejudice, normative expectations of the femininity and masculinity. We teach our women so many things. We talk to our women about so many do's and don'ts, but we don't say such things to our men. So there are differential expectations on the femininity and masculinity. There are socialization of gender and understanding of the family as a sphere as private and under the male authority, and the general acceptance of violence as a part of public sphere. So you can see that the street sexual harassment of the woman. If there is a whistling, instantly we look into our dupatta. Even at this age, मैं अभी भी देखती हूँ, अरे क्या हो गया? So that means these are there in our mind, that women start blaming themselves from whatever happens. So it is, you can see that the religious and historical traditions also, they have sanctioned women's physical punishment under the notion of entitlement and the ownership of women. There is a concept of chaste woman. So many religious customs and traditions are extremely harmful and unequal to the woman. If you see that perspective on the caste, it is only the Brahmin man who is the completely pure. Even women, they are impure because they give birth to the children. They have the menstruation, so they are impure. So these construction of inferiority, even if you see that the very nature nurture perspective of the feminism, it talks about that inability of man to reproduce, that made them create civilization through which man controls both nature and woman, who has got the capacity to reproduce. So man is more or less interested about the product, so that way they control both woman and nature to run the patriarchy. Sexuality is also tied to the concept of so-called family honor in many societies. So now you can see that there is a significant spurt of honor killing in the country. So we always decide whom women should marry. Society, family, all they take part in like the decision of women's marriage. Anulama marriage, if you look at the traditional marriage laws, upper caste man can marry a lower caste woman. That is a socially acceptable form of marriage. But if that happens otherwise, that means if a woman of upper caste or if woman in general exercising choice about marrying somebody which the family or society is not approving, that is not recognized as a accepted forms of marriage. And society tries to make laws, tries to do so many things to interfere with that choice. And we put lot of family honor, community honor on the woman's body. And you can see that is often the reason in a communal situation we try to violate the chastity of the woman of the other community. By doing that, it is not that we want to dishonor the woman only, we want to dishonor the entire community. Because again, we are putting that community honor in the woman's chastity. So the same norms around sexuality, can help us to account for the mass rape for the woman. So what we see that this notion of honor that led to the indulging in or forbidden sex or marrying and divorcing without the consent of the family. Then we have, of course, these are the cultural factors we talked about. Then there are legal factors. Being a victim of gender based violence is perceived in many societies as shameful and weak. Many women are still considered guilty of attracting violence against themselves through their behavior. This is everywhere. So often, victim of the rape is like that way. You can, if you look into the in the rape or if you follow the arguments in the court, you will see that the entire discourse is moving around whether woman is a chaste woman, whether the woman is a respectable woman or not. As if woman is not chaste, disrespectable, her respected can be violated. A sex worker is also has the equal rights like any woman to get justice in case of rape. But how many times a sex worker is entertained by the criminal justice system if she raised the question that she is being raped? So many women, that's why we see that in the rate of complaint is so less. 99%, these partly accounts for the enduring low levels of the reporting and investigation. 99% of the rape cases go unreported, and this 1% reported cases, only 27.2% are ended in conviction. Until recently, the law in some countries still differentiate between the public and private places, which left women particularly vulnerable to domestic violence. So in India, we see that we have the uniform criminal code, uniform tax code. If you violate the tax, irrespective of religion, you will be penalized similar fashion. If you commit a murder, irrespective of your religion, you will be given the similar kind of a punishment. But if you want to divorce your wife, if you want to have the custody of your children, if you want to marry, you have a different personal laws. And you can see that these personal laws deals with the issues, deals in the sphere where the violation of women's rights are maximum. And this is not only the characteristics features of our country, it is the characteristics features of many countries in the world. While most forms of gender-based violence are criminalized in India, law enforcement practices favors the perpetrators in many cases. आई थिंक आप लोग को सामने तो हथरस का एग्जाम्पल बहुत, इट्स अ वेरी बर्निंग एग्जाम्पल है. So, but still, we smell patriarchy at every stages of the criminal justice system. Our parliament don't recognize marital rape as a offense. They think if we recognize marital rape as an offense, it may break family. So, for the sake of family, woman has to endure this. One of the Chief Justice of our Honorable Chief Justice of our Supreme Court suggested one survivor of rape cases to marry the rapist. To him, this is a justice, justice to the girl. So, being a woman, we can understand what the girl will feel to leave her life with the rapist. We know the stand of the police and administration, which was very clear in terms of, for us, the Hathras case is there. Now, finally, the victim is going to get justice. So, this helps to account for low levels of trust in public authorities and these are the reasons that the woman and sexuality minorities, they have the low level of the trust in public authorities, and most of the crimes go unreported. Then there are economic factors as well. The lack of economic resources generally makes women particularly vulnerable to violence. It creates patterns of violence and poverty, and it becomes the self-perpetuated, making it extremely difficult for them to extricate themselves. When unemployment and poverty affect men, this can also cause them to assert their masculinity through violent means, which we are talking about in the interactionist perspective. But at other extreme, the explanation of violence against women solely as a result of men's experience of external factors like poverty, conflict, rapid economic and political change, which we were giving for the shadow pandemic, fails to take into account that gender-based violences cut across socio-economic boundaries. While evidence from women themselves in many different contexts indicates that poverty and crisis exacerbate violence against women, in particular, domestic violence, poverty is not in itself the cause of violence against women. Instead, it is one of the main factors that may aggravate and increase the violence. The fact that not all men in poor households are violent indicates that poverty is an insufficient explanation of violence. Exaggerating the role of poverty, in fact, negates people's agency in making choices about the way they react to factors outside of their control. Likewise, conflict and rapid social economic change affect the extent of gender based violence in the society, but they do not cause it. Existing rates of violence against women often increase during the time of social instability, and new patterns of abuse can be triggered. Situations like men's unemployment and women's entry into the workforce during the times of economic restructuring, or the lack of opportunities for demobilized soldiers after the war, may pose a challenge to men's sense of themselves as a powerful. In context where individual men feel their sense of masculinity and power is threatened, gender-based violence is condoned in law and customs. Such violence may increase in intensity and frequency as men struggle to maintain a sense of power and control. So, you can often see that men and women, they दोनों ही victim of situation है, दोनों ही poverty का शिकार है, but इसका response बहुत different से होता है. और if you see impact of poverty, वो women में ज्यादा होता है. But women are not reacting that violently the way men are reacting. So that means poverty or external conflicts is not the only reasons which men take advantage and they condone their behavior under the disguise of that. Then there are political factors. Of course, I think in days to come, we will be listening more about this. So, under-representation of the woman in the decision-making structures. If you see our Lok Sabha, this is highest in this time. It is having around 13%, and our representation of women in Rajya Sabha, it is around 10%. So, it has always been, right from independence, it is always 10 or less than 10. So, and we know what happened to the 33% reservation deal. So, this underrepresentation of women or negligible representation of women in the decision making bodies, they are not there in administration, they are not there in judiciary, they are not there in bureaucracy, they are not there in the boardrooms. boardrooms. So, every critical decision making setup, if you can see that, women are not there. If you see, the very primary first demand of the feminist movement was the suffragette right, right to vote, right to represent, because through which only that people in power and politics, I mean, the representation in power and politics means that they have the opportunities to shape and discuss the policy, and they can adopt measures that can combat gender-based violences and can support equality. In some cases, the topic of gender-based violence is deemed not to be necessary, with domestic violence also being given the insufficient resource and attention. For this, the threat to the status quo has been seen just as a justification for the violence. So, if the existing decision making power structure is not changed, then we hardly can expect justice. We hardly can expect policy changes if significant number of women are not there in those policy making bodies, decision making bodies. So, at the individual level, these factors include the perpetrators being abused as a, I mean, uh, often because of that, we see there is a justification for the male violence. We have the different theories behind it. Again, we try to theorize and justify male violence on the woman, justify the gender based violence. At individual level, the factors include that perpetrators being abused as a child or witnessing the marital violence in the home, having an absent or rejecting father, and frequent alcohol use. So you can see the perfect thing for the Hindi movies. So if you see a abusive hero there, then you see there is a perfect reason of his being abusive. We create, society justifies that. It is important to remember that psychological explanation for gender based violence, that is, witnessing marital violence as a child, having an absent or rejecting father, or being abused as a child, often fail to appreciate the role of wider inequalities in the relationship between woman and man, and the need to transform this inequality in the relationship. It is not merely the case that if one sees or experiences violence as a child, one will in turn become an abuser and abuse others. Studies emphasizes that girls are 3 to 6 times more likely to experience sexual abuse than the boys. But yet, vast majority of the sexual abuse is perpetrated by male, not by the female. I mean, the female adult. Cross-cultural studies have cited male control of wealth and decision making within the family and marital conflict as a strong predictors of abuse at the level of the family and the relationship. At the community level, women's isolation and lack of social support, together with male peer groups that condones and legitimizes men's violence, predict higher violence rates. Even if you can see that when a sexual abuse complaint comes within an institution, it could be academic institution, it could be any institution, you can see how patriarchy, how men all comes together to defend that. I mean the perpetrator, and the woman who are the complainant is shamed to the extent that she had to call it a quit. At the societal level, studies worldwide have found that violence against women is most common where gender roles are rigidly defined and enforced, and where the concept of masculinity is linked to toughness, male honor, or dominance. Other cultural norms associated with abuse include tolerance of physical punishment of women and children, acceptance of violence as a means to settle interpersonal dispute, and the perception that men have the ownership of women. So, wherever the rate of gender based violence is high, there is a passive collaboration from the victim in their process of victimhood. The woman, their mindhood, their mindset are created, constructed under patriarchy in such fashion that they themselves become collaborator in their oppression. So, therefore, an ecological approach, we have seen that there could be various reasons for the gender based violence. Gender based violence can be social, gender based violence can be cultural, it can be economic, it can be legal, it can be political. So, there are a number of factors which are, it can happen at the individual level, it can happen at the family level, it can happen at the community and society level. Even state can be the perpetrators of the gender based violence. So it has a multiplicity of the dimensions. So therefore, we need that an ecological approach to understand gender-based violence, that no one factor, ecological approach talks about no one factor alone can causes gender-based violence. Instead, several factors combine to raise the likelihood that a particular man may act violently towards women in a specific way. Now the concept comes that how we can understand about the impact of the gender based violence. So gender based violence has impact women's health. It has got a serious health impact, both immediate and long term. So this includes the physical and psychological health. Physical health includes the injury, disability, chronic health problems, uh, sexual and reproductive health problems, including contracting sexually transmitted diseases like spread of HIV/AIDS, and finally, it could be death. Psychological effects can be both direct and indirect. Directly, it causes anxiety, fear, mistrust of others, inability to concentrate, loneliness, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, suicide. Indirect, psychosomatic illness, withdrawal, alcohol and drug abuse. These are the part of the health abuse. Then economic and social impact. It has a profound economic and social impact. Rejection, ostracism, and social stigma at the community level. It can lead to reduced ability to participate in social and economic activities, acute fear for future violence, which extend beyond the individual survivor to the other members of the community. So often, one woman, if women are becoming vocal, one woman is taught a lesson to inflict fear among the other members. So they raise. So one sexual abuse while going to the school, that increases the dropout rate among the many other girls. So teaching lessons to one to prevent others. So it damage to women's confidence, resulting in fear of venturing into the public spaces, curtails women's education, which in turn limits their income generating opportunities. So then there is a impact on the woman's family and the dependent members. So it may lead to the divorce or broken families, jeopardize families' economic and emotional development. Babies born with health disorder as a result of the violence experienced by a mother during the pregnancies, like it may lead to the premature birth or low birth weight, increased likelihood of violence against children going up in the household where there are the domestic violence are very high. Collateral effects on children who witnessed violence at home, they have the emotional and behavioral disturbances, withdrawal symptoms, low self-esteem, nightmares, self-blame. Those children become very aggressive against the peers. So number of problems. Then there are indirect effects where we can see that compromised ability of the survivor to take care of their children, the child malnutrition and neglect due to the, lack of care, ambivalent or negative attitudes of a rape survivor towards resulting in the child. So many a times so happen that you can see that abandonment of the child. It's mostly happen when the child is born out of the rape or the sexual oppression. So that definitely, you can understand under what circumstance a woman forced to give birth to such children. So it is not only that victim or survivor, they only bear it. It has got an impact on the perpetrators too. sanctioning by the community, facing arrest and imprisonment, legal restrictions on their families. Their families also underwent, lot of hardships and ostracisms. It may lead to divorce, breakup, feeling of alienation from the families, minimizing the significance of violence for which they are responsible. So, gender based violence not only affects the victim or survivors mentally and physically, there are steep economic costs also associated with it. So, why we should try to stop gender based violence? You may say that I am not a victim of it, I am not contributing to it, still, why should I be an active part of it? You are, if you are a tax paying citizen, if you are a citizen of the country, you should take initiative, because it is not only affecting the victim or survivors, it has got a steep economic cost which is borne by the society. This includes the cost associated with delivering the care services, like including healthcare, shelter, livelihood opportunities. If a rape victim is found in the street, police has to take her to the public hospital. Her subsequent treatment cost is taken over by the, not only treatment, but legal cost is also bear by the government. So government is who? It's the public expenditure, means the taxpayers' money. So suppose the public, private, and social costs of violence are calculated. Some persons, they try to did this, some initiatives. In that case, the estimated total is staggering 2% of the global GDP, or it amounts to 1.5 trillion US dollar. So just think about the economic cost of gender based violence. So the impact of the violence on the society, it has got on the judicial system. I mean, it hinders the economic stability. So it has got a profound social cost. So now what we all have to do, I mean, it is not that it is the most difficult form of, form of violence or oppression, which can be eradicated by simple interventions. As I say that it requires an ecological approach to understand the gender based violence. At the same times, we need a multi-pronged approach to tackle this. So we have to have a responsive healthcare system. Healthcare providers should be able to recognize and respond to the gender based violence. That is very important, that identification. Often women will say that they have fell down from the staircase, they have bumped on the wall, but these are nothing, no falling from the staircase or bumping on the wall. Majority of the situation, these are the reaction of the gender based violence. So healthcare professionals must learn to recognize the signs. Hospitals, especially emergency room staff in both private and public clinic, they should be able to do this. So our doctors, our pediatricians, our psychiatrists, we need more and more public health staff to identify, recognize, and provide remedy for the victims of the violence. Then victim assistance services. These assistance services like one-stop crisis centers, helplines, this we need in more and more number, and we need to disseminate them, like how to approach them. Many a time, persons are victim of the situation, but they don't know how to, approach the assistance services. In the pandemic time, when we see that shadow pandemic was at its highest, that time also majority of these assistance services were closed because they were never recognized as essential services. So next pandemic, we must be ready with categorizing these services as an essential services. So we also have to work with the perpetrators. In globally, there is a movement that where the movement is called that men can stop violence. Often so happen, these perpetrators, if women counselors go and talk, they don't ready to accept that, because they don't consider this as a violence. Even post Nirbhaya, there was a one researcher came from the Anglia Ruskin University from UK to study on the rape convicts in the Tihar jail. And her study found that 70% of the convicts, they don't consider whatever they have done that is wrong. So that means, given a chance after coming out of the jail also, that larger social structure that make them think, that patriarchal mindset, that this kind of behavior chalta hai. They can do this with the woman. Women are overreacting. So this working with perpetrators are very important, that not just punishing them will help, changing their mindset, identifying what they have done that is wrong, that is very important. And right spirited men, and their number is no less, our students, our peers, our family members, we have to convince them to take part in this change movement. Then exploring masculinities, that men can stop violence. Good men, they don't violate women's dignity. They respect women. This kind of ideologies need to be spread through our education system, through our media. Just think about, I mean, there is a big disconnect between what our laws, legal discourse thinks and what our society thinks. Just think about all the movies, the way heroes, popular heroes, the way they tries to woo the heroine, jhumma chuma de de. So if one of our students try to do these things in the public, they will just go to the jail. That is nothing but stalking. That is nothing but sexual harassment. But our heroes regularly does this in the movies. So media, movies, that language, public language, we need to sanitize. So those are not following the legal discourse. So role of media and the and why we are only blaming media? Do our education system ever address such issues? Only when we at our PG level, undergraduate level. So these things which are harassment, which is amounts to identification of the violence, this should be there from the part of the school curriculum. Children should be allowed to, school systems are instrumental in stopping GBV before it starts. Regular curricula, sexuality education, school counseling program, school health services can convey the message that violence is wrong and can be prevented. It can suggest alternative models of masculinity, teach conflict resolution skills, and provide assistance to the children and adolescent who may be of the victims or the perpetrators of the violence. So we have to have a multi-pronged way to tackle this, because this is a very hard, form of oppression which can go by any single interventions. So we all have to work together for its eradication, and we don't know how long it's going to take. So I'm stopping here, and I'm ready for your questions. Yes, any question? Yeah.
Thank you, Sudeshna ma'am. Before I invite questions, I must say that when I was thinking of this topic, your name came to my mind, and I thought you will be one of the best options for this topic. And whenever I have invited you to speak, actually, whenever an organizer organize something, so they have in their mind that everything should be perfect. And all the time, my selection or this idea that I should invite you, at the end of the session, I always found it was the right choice. So this thing today also, so you have given such a broad picture, comprehensive picture. I mean, from cultural to structural, economic, social, every dimension of gender violence. The thing is that in any lecture, we want to give our student a number of perspectives so that they can look the thing. They can critically engage with their the surroundings. And I must say, this lecture has given them immense content, immense. So for that, I actually want to thank you and congratulate myself for inviting me.
Thank you.
Now I take up the questions.
Yes.
Madam,
I see one question.
Yes, big question. So if you will read, that would be good. They have written big questions.
Yeah, one is a comment. So like there is a Shushma, she said that in India, dignity is more important than woman's life, because we see honor killing, love jihad. When women enter in marriage, they are sacrificed, which society bond this with this woman. Secondly, if a man is angry and beat or slap a woman, they represent that act as a right thing. These things are common in village, and when I see these things in society, it makes me scared of marriage and relationship with men. So not only me and my whole generation is scared of this. And dear Sushma, this is exactly the purpose of the gender based violence, to scare you. So please try to defeat this scheme of things. So if you are there, you can come live. We can talk to you, but please don't get scared, because you are the change. We are looking forward to your generations. So don't get scared. Be aware of your rights. Be focused of what you would like to do, and absolutely don't get scared. And there is a second question from the Sony. Sony has got two questions: that can we say motherhood, sacrificing many things for a child, giving preference to child over everything, is natural, or is it is imposed by society? Sony, it is, if you see that definition of mother, if you go by the definition of mother, uh, who is the mother? Mother is one who nurtures and cares, who extends the nurtures and cares. So that way you can see that many fathers are very good mothers. But often what happened that we ascribe that biological mothers can be the naturally and socially best suited to be mothers. It is absolutely a social construct. We have the examples of the Yashoda. So it is not the Devaki. If we go back to our religion also, it is there. So any woman can be, so it is need not be, if a child is hungry, child does not see that whether a hand with a bangle is holding the bottle or a little stronger hand is holding a bottle. It is hunger need to be quenched. If the bed is wet, that need to be cleared. It can be father, it can be mother. So this is again a patriarchal construction that women should do this. So you see that lots of needs are created. So if we are unable to do all these functions which we are supposed to do, we have a guilt. So if my son is not so well, and if I have to attend absolutely urgent thing, although I know that there could be many people at home can take care of my child, my anxiety is real. But it is not that I have to be physically there. But society made you think that in similar situation, father can go and do all the other activities, but mother has to be there with the child. So these all are construction. So you are absolutely right in identification that unnatural goals of motherhood, and you can see that this is the primary reasons why we see so many pipeline leakages, why our women are getting educated. They are possibly, if you see any university, any convocation, you see they are possibly the toppers in all possible departments. But we don't see them in administration. We don't see them in company boardrooms. We don't, in company, they may join as a junior level, but they don't rise to the top, because in between, the labor force participation rate in India, it is coming down in each subsequent years. So, it is a very, very baffling thought to the globally, that why labor force participation is coming down. So one of the reason is that this unnatural expectations from the motherhood. Then Sony, you have a second question also, that we say women are discriminated for or suppressed by the society, more specifically by men. Don't we do psychological violence against those men who don't discriminate or treat women? If you have not done wrong, we are not telling all men do it. So we say some men do it. So if you have not done it, then you should not feel suppressed. Why should you feel suppressed? And society does not condone you, or society does not look at men very badly because of that. So men are absolutely not feeling psychologically stressed. So Priya Patel, that are you in favor of law against rape cases in countries like Saudi Arabia? Should they be implemented in India, because changing the mindset is not easy task? So again, Priya, what I'm telling that the stringent is the, I mean, first of all, you tell me that why we want so much stringent punishment in the rape. Again, we are putting lot of values on the honor of female bodies. If I go to the street and if I met with an accident, if I lose one of my feet, everybody will be sympathetic to me because I met with an accident. Why can't we consider rape is another accident? We consider that rape is going to devastate a woman. Why this should be? It is another accident, and a survivor has got equal rights. Moment we ask for such stringent punishment, again reporting will be very, very less. Reporting will be less, so does the conviction. Already only 1% cases are reported, and among those 1%, only 27% ended up in conviction. So if you want to cut, as in the Arab countries, if you want to cut the hands, if you want to do such things, then conviction will be even less. And with such stringent punishment, do you think rape has stopped in the Arab countries? It has not. None of the countries in the world you can say that GBV is gender-based violence are not there. Even it is more. So I am not in favor of giving such harsher punishment. So changing mindset, that is more needed. We have to work more organically from the more, you can see that from the more earlier level, through our education, through the community interventions, through the peer group intervention, rather than just asking for such drastic, harsh punishment. Then there is an Anamika. There is a lot of debate on the form of amount of punishment to be met with the rapist. What is your view? So again, Anamika. So I am in favor of that more women should go with the complaint, and more men should get convicted. So I don't want to take their life. I want the transformation of their mindset. So even if you give them the harsher punishment, it may not change their mindset. So we have to think about the way they start respecting women, they start condoning gender-based violence. Shikha Kumari, she has a question that if government is making many policies for women empowerment, then why India has slipped 112th globally in terms of gender gap? So your question is answered, Shikha. So policies are met, but how the implementations are done. So we are an implementation failures country. So because we don't believe what we have made as a policy, that is very, very important. So unless we are convinced that child marriage is bad, child marriage is really harmful for the girl and for the society, then how many laws we make, it is not going to change. We will still find the ways to undo this. We have a lot of ways that we know that feticide or infanticide is bad. We have many ways, but you see that most educated, that if you see the sex ratios, especially the child sex ratios, it is not, we always try to say that it is bad in the rural areas. No, you can see that it is horrible in the metropolitan area because facilities are more. And who supports, who helps, who are the collaborators? It is the most educated people, doctors and nurses. So you cannot go yourself and just do a selective abortion. You have to be collaborated by a health professional. So if a health professional is convinced, or if he thinks or she thinks that by getting some money, yes, some health professionals are women too, who are, we must acknowledge that also. So that way, that unless and until mindset is changing, just by changing, if some of you studied sociology, you can see that there is a Ogburn who talk about that leap, that cultural gap. So where your material culture goes too fast and your cultural, other culture that fails to, he talks about the cultural lag. So our legal system is going fast, but our cultural system are failing to catch up with the legal system. So unless and until we are keeping our societies, if we are unable to make them realize that what are the negative impact of their mindset, that patriarchal mindset, howsoever policies and laws we change, nothing is going to happen. Then Madhulika, she asked the question that, Madam, educated people also do this. So what should we do with them? So that's it. That is not a real education. That's what I'm telling. So we are earning degrees. We may are getting maybe getting the good jobs, but our education is fail to address the basic points. So do you consider this as a true education? Then Soumya, you have the question that a lot of cases are not reported regarding rape and harassment due to the social stigma. You are very right. Because you can see that if it is reported, the kind of, rape that happened once, but once the proceedings, legal proceedings started, the victim gets verbally raped many more times in the courtrooms. Her entire characters, so many things are being questioned. So it is not the offender who gets stigmatized, it is the victim, it is the survivor who gets stigmatized more. So it is women, we have to come out of the stigma. That this is no stigma, it is not my fault. I am only accountable or feeling bad for something wrong which I have done. For somebody else's failure, I shouldn't blame myself. So we have to make that strong mindset. Then Shweta is asking that, ma'am, what are the steps one should take to change the mindset in the society apart from education? Because
I think,
numerous,
ma'am,
yeah,
you have already answered this question. If you
yes,
see,
yes.
So
Then Anamika is asking about that recent ordinance by the UP government regarding interreligious marriage is constraining the woman's right to choice. Yes, Anamika, that's I was telling you. If you entire the perspective of honor, if you look at that, we keep questioning about women's rights of choice, be it on the caste line, be it on the religious line. So women are not allowed to choose. Men, they're free to choose. So these perspectives need to be questioned. You are very right.
So I think we have taken maximum questions, and you have
Yes.
wonderfully answered all the questions, I must say. And the interactive session was actually interactive in true way. And once again, now it is the time to for the formal vote of thanks. I'll begin with expressing my sense of gratitude to Sudeshna ma'am. I mean, I must say, this was a wonderful lecture. It was actually a thought-provoking lecture. I mean, because it it is a lecture where you discuss the conceptual understanding, theoretical perspective, the real data, remedies, and actually uh, the many questions you raised, and the question which came from the student, it is actually conveyed that the point made by you reached to them. So I thank you,
Yes.
ma'am, on the behalf of the department, on my personal behalf. And I must say, with this thank you, there is also invitation for any future. I mean, whenever we think that we need you, we'll keep inviting you. And
No, I love to be part of your initiatives, and it was really very interactive session. I really loved the students' responses. That's
yes.
really encouraging.
And secondly, I'd like to thank all my colleagues, Dr. Punita Pathak, Dr. Sneha Patel, Dr. Jitendra Lalwani, for being with us. I want to thank my students. They have raised many important questions, and I want to tell you all that keep questioning.
Yes.
Don't stop questioning. That is the purpose. That is the purpose of all academic event. We are not here to transmit certain information in your mind. We want your mind to be trained in a way which can raise questions. So I thank one and all present in this lecture today. And tomorrow also, I'll expect all my colleagues and my students to join us. So once again, thank you so much
Thank
from
you.
the Department of Political Science, from my from my personal side. Thank you, ma'am. So see you
Thank you so
again.
much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.